So this is a great representation of how you should look at your website and your online presence as a central location where you're redirecting and pointing all of your content to. So if a user wants to find out more about you, services that you provide, products that you have, they have a place to go. Even though some of your social properties, the Web 2.0 properties, might be growing and it's easier to grow a Facebook community or a Twitter following than the traffic on your website. You're going to get a lot more benefit from your website traffic. And having those social properties feed into that central spot is going to be crucial for growing your online presence. Setting up a website is actually going to be really easy and straightforward. All you have to do is pick a domain name and then pick a hosting company. Now I'm going to provide a resource to several of the hosting companies that I've used that I'm very happy with, but there are a lot of hosting companies out there, and there's a lot of options. So do look around and do some comparison between all the different host providers before you actually pick one of the hosting providers. And also, one of the things too is with domain names, you want to pick a host provider if you're just starting out, a host provider that actually has domain names as well. So this will allow you to really do everything as a one-stop shop where you can register your domain, you can point your, they actually just point the domain name to your host, and you don't have to actually worry about any of that. All you have to do is go in, pick up the web hosting, have a domain name ready. There's a few resources here that I'm just showing you in order to pick domain names. I usually like to go to domain.com because of the fact that you can enter in a domain name and do a search, and they actually give you suggestions. They do the brainstorming for you, providing options and suggestions for domain ideas. So if the domain name that you're trying to register is taken, it'll provide you options here, as we can see, with different domains. So we've got a .co, .net option, and so on. But if you are setting up a website, try to stick with the .coms because users are more familiar with .coms. So you want them to be go into your website and they don't have to type in something like .club or .website because it's not going to really make a lot of sense to a lot of users. And as well, for performance within search, you're going to find that .coms perform actually better than the other .extensions. So you really do want to stick with the .com, and obviously a lot of the .coms are already gone, but using a tool like this gives you the ability to get some fairly decent .coms. So there's a few here doing any domain.com, and this is only $8 a month. It's not registered yet, and there are, if you do look around, there are some fairly good .coms available still. If you are looking to buy, there's always an option to purchase a domain. But again, if you're just starting out and you probably want to keep your costs down as much as possible, try domain.com as a source for domain suggestion. And there's a few other sites as well that are really good and in order to find and suggest domain names. As well, what I usually do when I'm creating a domain name is I'll do some brainstorming and pick up a few of the keywords, do a thesaurus lookup of the words, find alternative words, and then put them into here, domain.com, and see what I get back. And I've actually found some really good domain names that way, so it's a great way to pick a domain name and get yourself started. So you can, of course, you can register with domain.com, you can get web hosting there, or you could just take your domain name once you find one that's available and open and go to another hosting provider and actually enter in that domain name. And as we can see here, One-on-One does the same type of thing here. And One-on-One is, it's really good prices. I've been using One-on-One for almost 8 years and I get really good service with them. So I would recommend One-on-One. And as you can see, they do have alternatives here as well. but they're only providing the alternative extensions, and that's where this domain.com is better, because it's actually giving you some domain ideas. But again, just do some brainstorming, come up with a good domain, and but this is really important, because you should give it a lot of thought to the domain that you're registering, because this is going to be where your name, what your website is going to be known as, and so try to pick something that's going to be in line with what you're doing online, and that it's not going to be totally off. It's going to make sense for users. You can also pick something generic, and even though if it is fairly long, that's okay as well, because users these days you don't see a lot of really short domain names, so having a longer domain name is fine as well. Users aren't going to be completely off of that. Try to avoid multiple letters together. So if you have one word and it's ending with the same letter as the other one starting, so you want to try to avoid those types. You can do those ones where you do those different types of spellings, where you could do cars with a K or something like that, but also sometimes it's not always the best alternative, because you want to try to make it easy for a user to remember something that's memorable phrase, 2 to 3 words together. .com is usually the best way to go, and that's what you're going to find that's available. Something like cars street or something like that, if I spelt it like that, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to users. So make sure that you avoid these double letters, double characters, and also try to avoid misspellings, unless it really just makes sense, or if it's just a phrase that you really want to use.